One for Dr. Madras and the other one for Mr. Kilmer. My first question is really just a clarification because I had looked at the data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, and having looked at the data for teens, for 12 to 17-year-olds, my understanding, the way I saw the data from 2008 to 2015-16, my impression was that for Colorado, the rate of past marijuana use in the past month, the rate had been pretty stable. It had gone down a little bit, but it was not significant. So that was my impression, but maybe I read the data incorrectly. So that would be my clarification. And Mr. Kilmer, I had read an opinion piece or a commentary in the that you wrote in the San Francisco Chronicle a few years ago, and you seem to question the validity of self-report surveys. And I think that's very important because a lot of, actually most of the data that we have is from those self-report surveys. And you seem to indicate that in fact, since, for instance, after legalization, people might feel more comfortable in reporting that they have used marijuana, and that may explain some of the increase that we see in those data. So I would like you to comment on this. Thank you.
Professor Madras.
Well, according to the NISDA survey, the average rate of regular teen marijuana use in the legalized states of Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington is 30% higher than the U.S. rate as a whole between 2006 and 2017. Now, yearly fluctuations are not as valid as what the trends would be over a decade of time. And past month use continues to rise above the national average among youth. In other words, does it increase in certain states if you have medical marijuana, which has been a very significant source of marijuana for young people before legalization, diversion of medical marijuana from adults. It continues to rise compared to other states that have not legalized on average and have not medicalized on average. So I think we have to take that into account. The other thing that has happened is that daily use has increased dramatically over the past 10 years, and also perception of harm amongst youth has declined dramatically over the past period of time. And I can show you the graphs. I have them in front of me right now.
We'll go over to Mr. Kilmer.
Before I say anything about the self-report surveys, I just want to, you're hearing different interpretations of the data here, and I think one thing you have to keep in mind is when we're talking about legalization, even though Colorado and Washington, they passed the initiative in 2012, the stores didn't open up until 2014. And some of the most recent data we have on past month use that's specific to Colorado or to Washington only covers the 2015 to 2016 period. So still, it's very short. And so essentially what you're hearing a lot of people doing is they're talking about the trends. Well, crime was down below, before legalization, crime was here, and then after legalization, crime was here. And then some people will attribute that increase or that decrease all to crime. That's not how we do research. It's important that we have to ask when people make these claims is there a counterfactual? What's the control group? What are you comparing this to? And Dr. Madras actually mentioned that at the end of her last response in terms of we now have that with respect to some of the changes in medical laws. We've had enough time. Toward beginning to learn more about the differences in the laws that have been implemented in the states. But with respect to recreational legalization, a lot of what you hear people talking about are just the trends. So I urge you, when you hear people make these claims on both sides, ask them, what's your control group? And if they don't have a control group, make sure you take that with several grains of salt. Now, with respect to first of all, I appreciate that you read that old piece, but it still applies. In the United States, we probably spend $50 million a year on our national survey on drug use and health. But the last time where we asked people, did you use all these different substances in the past month or past year, I believe the last time we tried to validate that is, had people take the survey and then had them submit to a drug test so we could see if they were honest, was in 2000, 2001. Now, this is important because as you were suggesting, if over time, if the stigma associated with cannabis use decreases and you see a decrease before and after, even after controlling for other explanations, it makes it hard to determine, well, how much of that increase that we detected actually was because consumption increased, or was it because people just ended up, were more honest about their consumption? So what I would urge Canada to consider, I know your household survey isn't every year, it's every 3 years, correct? Or it's, you know, it might be useful as soon as possible, the next time you do that, to select out a sample and then actually ask those individuals to submit to a drug test. I mean, it will have not, you know, there'll be no legal implications, and there, I mean, there's a body of literature that looks at this, because this is going to be quite useful as you go down this path and you're trying to learn about, well, you know, what's happening with consumption? Are we seeing different changes in different provinces? You're going to want to have a good idea about at least what share of people are honest about their consumption right now. And this isn't something you have to do every year, but at least in the context of the United States, if you're going to spend $50 million a year on a survey, how about every once in a while you spend a couple $1 million and try to validate it?
Okay, thank you very much. I guess this all goes to prove what we hear from the United States. We'll have to sort out the alternate facts.